U.S. President Joe Biden is set to host the leaders of South Korea and Japan at the presidential retreat at Camp David today. They're gathering for their first ever trilateral summit in the face of shared security challenges.
Officials say the meeting will usher in a new era of relations. Mr. Biden has been seeking to deepen ties with the two countries in recent times. This comes amid concerns over provocative behavior from North Korea and perceived threats from a growing Chinese military.
All right. For more insight into the potential outcomes and implications, we'll now speak with Dr. Takuya Matsuda. He's a research fellow at the Yokosuka Council on Asia-Pacific Studies. He joins us this morning from Tokyo. Dr. Matsuda, tell us a bit more about the significance of the meeting between the three leaders and what we can expect to emerge from the one-day event.
Morning, and thank you for having me. So basically, it's actually very significant because these three countries had trouble actually coming, on the same page when it comes to aligning the strategic priorities. And there's been a lot of, issues based on history and all that between Japan and South Korea. So it actually demonstrates that Japan and South Korea actually trying to realign the strategic priorities and actually coming up with a common vision on the Indo-Pacific. And also when it comes to missile defense, for example, we have like North Korea, Russia, and China in the theater. So if these countries don't have the same strategic priorities, doesn't have this common command and control structure, for example, there'll be a lot of issues. So these countries coming together, coming up and potentially building up, a shared command and control structure, strategic priorities, that's extremely important in case a conflict occurs here in East Asia.
Now, we know Mr. Biden has been seeking to deepen ties with the two countries in recent times, both in terms of trade and security. But this, in particular, this meeting at Camp David, this is primarily about China, isn't it?
Well, I mean, actually, to be honest, yes. I mean, for North Korea is also obviously in the picture. For South Korea, North Korea has always been a primary threat. But it is true that, South Korea has also started to see China as a potential security threat for them. For example, a Taiwan contingency does not only affect Japan, but South Korea actually, South Korean tankers, like their vessels actually, trade ships actually go through the Taiwan Strait. So if there's a blockade, for example, over Taiwan, it also does affect South Korea as well. So China is more of a threat for Japan and the United States, but South Korea is starting to feel that sort of potential steering challenge looming behind the scenes. So basically, it is about North Korea as well. That's also the reason the hypersonic missile defense system is something that is going to be discussed, obviously. But actually, it also does suggest that China is also starting to become a concern for South Korea as well, not only for the United States and Japan.
We're already hearing some reaction from China. They have criticized the summit. North Korea could be preparing military provocations. I mean, how big of a threat would a more united front between Japan, South Korea, and the U.S. be to Beijing and Pyongyang? And how concerned are you that this could perhaps incite further tensions in the region?
Actually, this is like a chicken and egg issue for here, because for China, actually, when Chinese provocation actually did sort of bring Japan and South Korea together. When you think about it, in 2019, actually South Korea was threatening to withdraw from a shared military intelligence agreement with Japan. So, and China's actually strategies to drive a wedge between Japan and South Korea was working pretty well, actually, just 4 years ago. So Chinese provocation actually has, inadvertently, like we saw in Europe, Sweden and Finland's accession to NATO was an inadvertent effect of Putin's invasion of Ukraine. So we can see some parallels here, right? So China's provocation over Taiwan, actually, and also these concerns over potential contingency actually inadvertently brought these countries together. So obviously for China, this is not a great scenario. You don't want to be encircled by your potential, and also potentially powerful opponents. But in a sense, this is a chicken and egg situation where Chinese provocations or concerns over Taiwan inadvertently brought these countries together, who all had trouble coming on the same page, just like 4 or 5 years ago.
So you're saying there's sort of lessons that can be learned then from events that have happened in Ukraine with Russia's invasion, and that sort of has gotten people a bit more sensitive to different movements here in Asia?
Obviously, in Japan, Japan has always been considered as a pacifist country where people are actually not, not interested in actually, Japan has considered to be a pacifist country for a long time, but I think the war in Ukraine, the images you see on TV, became sort of a trigger for a lot of people that something happens in Japan's backyard, for example. This is not something similar might actually happen. So I think the war in Ukraine, was something that kind of prompted people here in Japan to be more aware of the potential. We don't want a war here, but just that to be more aware of potential contingency that could occur, and also when you look at international relations, like provocation does invite other people to unite together. So there's a lot of parallels between Sweden and Finland's accession to NATO, which was unthinkable for a very long time, and Japan and South Korea coming together for closer security ties was something that a lot of Asia observers weren't expecting to happen anytime soon. So you can see that sort of parallel when there's some sort of security challenges that actually jeopardizes security of the countries in the region, that could actually bring countries together in an unexpected way. And that's why this is very historic and also a very promising development.
Doctor, you earlier mentioned the differences that still remain, and given the meeting comes after years of strained ties between Seoul and Tokyo, what sort of issues need to be ironed out to ensure unity lasts beyond the tenures of each country's current leader?
That's a very good question. It's a very hard question to answer, because when it comes to historical issues, like political issues that two countries have, and security, even between Japan and China, when it comes to Senkaku Diaoyu Islands, actually Deng Xiaoping said that he doesn't really care about these islands anymore, and a couple of decades down the road that becomes an issue. So, and back then for Japan and China, the Soviet Union was a common threat. So if you have a common threat, history, political issues just sort of becomes irrelevant. So you can see how there's always this fluctuation. So these historical political issues never go away. But at least for now, I think the most important thing here is to institutionalize this trilateral sort of meeting or a framework between the three leaders, and that will actually help sort of build up the momentum for a much needed some sort of security coordination between the three countries in case of a regional conflict in the region, which is with the absence of any regional sort of framework or some sort of command and control sort of a security arrangement. If there's a war, it could have a lot of consequences. So institutionalizing this security cooperation in some form will be the best way to get over these historical issues and work on the security challenges that we all face, and we all have to work on hard.
All right, thank you for your time this morning, Dr. Takuya Matsuda, there, Research Fellow at the Yokosuka Council on Asia-Pacific Studies.